Ravager's Mark versus Abrasive Whetstone. Which one is better, or in what circumstance? So, like I said, this video is going to be Ravager's Mark versus Abrasive Whetstone. The overall build I used to run the DPS test was Zania's Malice, Probability Cord, Akari's Warband, and then Stone of Balance. The reason I went for Stone of Balance is because it's all damage. This is going to help mod, bleed, and the actual shot for shot damage, which is going to be very beneficial, simply because I'm using Merciless, which allows us to proc bleed without the use of twisting wounds. As for Mutator, I am going to be using Momentum, which does kind of skew results a little bit, simply because it has a build up. I can't just shoot something, and I would normally do this on a range just to make this a little bit more clear. However, we can't really bleed targets on a range, as well as the fact of if we're going to get the full effect and test the full effect of Ravager's Mark, I kind of need to get something below 50% health. Now, the annoying thing with this is quite simply Abrasive Whetstone is very orientated, like heavily orientated towards just a straight DPS build. It's crit chance, it's crit damage, yes, mods can crit as well. However, the overall effect of crit chance on mods is minimal, simply because we don't really have that much that gives crit chance to mods. However, something that can give 30% all weapon damage is obviously going to be very powerful. So the first test here is just going to be in terms of straight DPS, and with maximum momentum as well as having Akari's Warband maxed out, we hit a maximum number of 484 for a critical weak point. All we're going to do now is swap Abrasive Whetstone for Ravager's Mark, and then basically just repeat the test. Now, one of the caveats to this is I do need to kind of cycle my mods in the same order, so I did try my best. It might be some human error has snuck in, although I did test this several times, and the highest consistent damage I was able to get with Ravager's Mark with the enemy above 50% health is as follows: 158. This is obviously considerably lower, but of course the Ravager is above 50% health. Luckily though, Yaesha has those lovely tanky dudes at the start of the Red Throne where they have no weak points, but we can just check our variable crits. And annoyingly, I forgot that I was wearing Akari's Warband, which does give us a slightly skewed result, so we're going to ignore the 163 that we're seeing at the moment, simply just because now we're at 174. Akari's Warband, ladies and gentlemen. Very powerful ring. If you're not running it, I do recommend it, considering the amount of dodging we have to do in this game. I'm now going to be swapping Abrasive Whetstone again for Ravager's Mark. We've already established that above 50% health, Abrasive Whetstone will do more, but we want to see if Ravager's Mark will do more when it's below 50% health. So for this one, we're going to try and proc Akari's Warband again, as well as have the enemy below 50% health. The number to beat is 174. Now at max stack before Akari's we're hitting 150, which is lower than the 163 we were hitting before Akari's in the previous test. But now we have Akari's active, we're just gonna smack into this guy and we're hitting 178. So in terms of actual damage output, as long as they're below 50%, you will actually hit more. However, the problem is the ratios of these hits. See, the big problem with Abrasive Whetstone is it doesn't just give critical hit damage, it also increases your critical hit chance. And although crit chance is obviously a chance, the higher you can get it, the more your overall output is going to be. On screen now is the full DPS track for the build that I am running, minus the critical hit damage from Momentum, just so that it's more in line with the test against the heavy boys in Yaesha rather than the boss. Hopefully we can see that in overall performance there's not that much difference between them. It mostly just comes down to the ratio in which you crit, and due to Abrasive Whetstone giving you another 15% chance to hit that ratio or to crit, it will actually end up being more in terms of just straight DPS. Now if we do the same again but put Ravager's Mark to the enemy being below 50% health, which is a 30% increase, despite the fact that we now hit harder, we're still doing less DPS within the crits, simply just because of the frequency of the crits. Okay, yes, our hits will do more, but we're not hitting as frequently with the optimal amount of damage. The flip side to this though is however going to be things like mod builds. Although you can bolster your crit chance as well as crit damage with mods, the way in which you're able to do this is not as numerous as it would be with weapons. So being able to bolster the all weapon damage side of things, especially in terms of mod use, actually has some great potential. Not only is it going to increase your base damage, it's going to increase, if your mod even has a tick on it, it's going to increase the tick, and if it does crit, it will also increase the crit. Therefore, if you're going just for straight normal Unga Bunga DPS, Abrasive Whetstone, albeit not by much, is the better option. That being said, Ravager's Mark is much greater in terms of its use utility, being able to fit into a variety of different builds as long as you can bleed something, and from here it's able to increase your mod damage, your overall weapon damage, your melee damage if needed. It just fits more comfortably into more builds, but if you are just wanting to go straight DPS with your long gun or your handgun, like I said, Abrasive Whetstone is going to be the better option. Now typically as well, this is also going to be dependent on how much crit chance you have. If you have no crit chance whatsoever, then obviously Ravager's Mark is going to be more worthwhile than Abrasive Whetstone because it is literally just relying on crit. From the testing I've done, it does seem to be about 40% crit chance is kind of the minimum. This means that with Abrasive Whetstone active you go to 55% crit chance, but anything below that, Ravager's Mark does seem to just outperform. Though on the flip side to this, how much critical hit damage you have doesn't really seem to matter. There is going to be a discrepancy between the critical hit damage, the weak point, and the weak point crit, and then depending on what boss it is you're fighting and how easily it is you are able to get to the weak point, it may actually turn out that due to the heightened damage, your heightened base damage, your weak point multiplier will be able to do more, therefore allowing you to do more with Ravager's Mark than it would do with Abrasive Whetstone. So yay, more spreadsheets. Basically the exact same as previously. I've put the amulet to 25 for Ravager, which is going to be its average damage it will give us across the course of a fight. However, this time we're going to look at weak point as well as weak point crit. You will notice that despite the fact that in terms of just crit, Abrasive still does more, but in terms of weak point and weak point crit, Ravager will do more. However, this is also assuming that we have 100% uptime on the boss's weak spot, which, despite the fact that there are some pretty hefty chunky weak spots out there, this is obviously not going to be the case. The differential between these two, weak point crit, and then indeed critical hits, is going to be largely up to you as the player as well as what boss it is you're fighting. If you're looking for a weak spot on Legion, I feel sorry for you. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.